Hello. Primary election debate for Republican candidate, Congressional District 2. This debate is sponsored by Clean Elections, the state's nonpartisan voter education agency. My name is Jim Ninsel, and I'll be moderating this debate. Our format will be a little different today. We're hosting a 30-minute one-on-one since only one candidate has agreed to participate. The incumbent, Eli Crane, has declined to join tonight's discussion. Thanks to our partnership with the Clean Elections Commission and the Arizona Media Association, we're working to make sure all 2024 debates are the most accessible in Arizona history. That means this conversation will air on a long list of local TV stations, radio stations, and digital platforms, including support from local newspapers. It's a shared effort among hundreds of local media brands across Arizona. Transparency is critical here. That's why this conversation has been designed with input from a broad group of journalists in Arizona representing urban and rural communities. Thank you to voters across Arizona who have submitted questions too. We reviewed all of them to make sure every voice is heard. However, no candidate has been given advanced access to any of the questions. With that, let's introduce the candidate. Jack Smith, welcome and thank you for being here.
Jim, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
To begin, you have 2 minutes for an opening statement.
I appreciate that. My name's Jack Smith. I'm running for Congress, and the reason I'm running is because we've seen a lot of divisiveness lately in our Congress, in our U.S. Congress. We've not been able to come together as an American people as the way we have been in the past. And my opponent, quite honestly, is not stepping up and doing what he needs to be doing as congressman. He's actually believing that walking into a room, dropping a grenade, and blowing the whole place up is the way to go. I, on the other hand, am the opposite. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I love my country. I love my district. And I've lived in Prescott Valley for almost 20 years, married my wife there 15 years ago. And I cannot think of a better place to be or live or even work. I'm a former county supervisor for Yavapai County for 7 years. I was on the Trump administration, and then I was also on the Ducey administration as the Division of School Facilities Administrator. For the Trump administration, I was USDA Rural Development Director, which means all throughout the state of Arizona, I was able to take federal dollars and put it into those rural areas to where they were in real need, whether it be fire departments, medical facilities, school facilities, and so on. I'm here today because I offer a change as to what's going on. If you don't like what's happening in D.C., like me, I'm sure that you feel there's something better that we can do. I think there's time for a change, and I feel like I can make that change happen. I am a workhorse. I don't just stand by and work or not work. My opponent, on the other hand, he likes to point fingers and say a lot of it's about the swamp or somebody else's issue. But we really need to get to work as Americans and get together. So I'm here, and I hope I can trust you to work for you as your next congressman for CD2. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, can you point to one or two votes that Eli Crane has taken that you would disagree with and go a different direction on?
Absolutely. I can point at a few of them, and in reality, you've probably heard of House Bill 5525, which was the border bill. Came out of the Freedom Caucus, in fact. That bill was right off the bat required the Biden administration to actually finish the Trump wall. That alone on that bill went far enough, unlike my opponent who said it didn't go far enough at all. That's why he voted no against it. We have some real border issues. We need to deal with the border. We need to deal with illegal immigration. There is one way to come across that border, and that is legally. Tying the hands of the Border Patrol or the customs agents is not the right thing to do. We need to ensure everyone, including our president and elected officials, are stepping up and following established federal law. The second one, I would say, would be the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Now, when you say you're a conservative, that means you're wanting to reduce spending. You want smaller governments. You want to be able to put responsibility back in the hands of local governments and people like that. So from my standpoint, the Fiscal Responsibility Act that Eli Crane voted against would have reduced by over $1 trillion across the board. And I don't understand why, if we're going to reduce our overall debt and we talk about how much the debt is increased and how much we're going to cut spending, that we're not voting for something that would actually reduce the debt. So those are two in particular things that I would specifically change if I was there in that seat.
You've also been critical of Congressman Crane for not living in the district. Do you think that is a important thing?
That's absolutely critical. If you don't live in the district, how are you supposed to know how people feel? When you're driving the streets, when you're actually taking your kids to the schools, the local schools, talking with your local officials, that's how you figure out what's inspired that community to come together. When you're not there, my opponent, as you pointed out, lives in Tucson. And we've not had a representative in CD2 that lived literally in Prescott or Prescott Valley in a very long time. So I think it's time that we change that, because when you get to know your neighbors, you get to know the issues. When you get to know the issues, you know how to deal with the issues and move them forward. It's incredible that we would ever elect somebody that was not in the district. So yes, I think it's critically important, especially when you're going to the grocery store and you see people and you're shaking their hands and you're trying to impress upon them that you're doing a good job in D.C., but in reality, you're nowhere to be seen. In fact, I hate to bring this up because I'm not a basher, I don't like to bash people, but as a representative, you got to get to know your mayors, you got to get to know your town councils, you have to know the people that makes these communities drive. And for having offices in the district that are closed to appointment only, that is not being responsible to your citizens. That's, hey, I'll get to you when I can. And I can tell you, from across the spectrum, whether it be up in Show Low, where I've been, down in Eloy, these folks really want that connection with their representative. CD2 is a very, very, very rural district. I know rural issues, whether it be water, whether it be emergency services, whether it be school buildings. Those are the things we need to focus on, those dollars. Our SAFER grants for our fire departments, where are those at? Where is Eli working on these issues? So being local, you know about these things. You work with the mayors, you work with the town councils, and all of a sudden you're starting to get things done in that momentum fashion.
And Congressman Crane was one of the 8 Republicans who voted with the Democrats to oust Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Would you have voted to oust Speaker McCarthy?
No, I would not. The reason I say I wouldn't go that far, because number one, we got to stop the finger pointing. If you're like me, you're tired of the back and forth in our own Republican Party. We've got a choice come July 30th. You can either choose to keep things the way they are, or you can choose to elect me, and I'm going to go in and we're going to build team synergies around working together to basically bring stuff back for our district. CD2 is a very dynamic district where it needs a lot of work, whether it be weather stations for our Show Low friends up there so they can drive data to their firefighters in this wildfire seasons, whether it be roadways. You know, we have very little roadways in the state of Arizona that are interstates. So transportation is a huge issue when you're talking about getting goods from point A to point B, especially when the road is so bumpy, half of that product is destroyed by the time you get there. So we have a lot of issues that need to be solved by someone who is local. So that's how I feel.
Now, the Crane campaign, as you know, has said that former Speaker McCarthy is behind your campaign, and they point to ads from the American Prosperity Alliance that are critical of Congressman Crane. Would you care to respond to those allegations?
Absolutely. I'll be honest, because that's who I am. I don't know Kevin McCarthy. I'd actually like to meet him someday, and I hope I do. I will allow anybody who is a good conservative to support me, but unfortunately at this point, I've not met Kevin McCarthy. I'm not a part of his team at this point, but I will say that being a part of something that's greater than yourself is more important than anything else. If that's all Eli Crane has to come at me, is to say that I'm either bought and paid for by Kevin McCarthy, or I'm out to get him because he outs McCarthy, hey, I was on the same track as saying we need to make some changes in D.C. so that they understand what our local communities are going through. And at that time, I was a county supervisor. I believe I was a county supervisor. So those are the things, you know, if you want to just throw at me that I'm a McCarthy guy, that's great. I would happily join with Kevin McCarthy if he wants to join the team to help us get some reality back to our district.
Are there areas where you think you could work with Democrats and the Biden administration?
I think there are areas to where we as Americans need to come together and work together, absolutely. I've worked in bipartisan measures before, the distracted driving ordinance. I was told years ago when I brought that up here in the state of Arizona. The reality ends up being we had kids who take these cell phones, and I'm looking for my cell phone here, but we have kids that are actually growing up with these cell phones in their hands. And at the time, people didn't realize that when a child is looking at their cell phone and trying to drive an automobile, they don't mix. So in the time, if you're going 55 miles an hour and you look down to that one text, you've already gone a football length by the time you try to realize something's in front of you. So I went ahead and went forward in a bipartisan manner, and we got distracted driving ordinances passed right there in Yavapai County. And we're not a nanny state, right? We don't want to tell people what to do. We need less government. We need less regulation. What we need to do is just keep those devices out of our hands, set them down, and utilize wireless or Bluetooth or something else. It doesn't matter if you use the phone. It only matters if you have it in your hand. And we saved a lot of lives by doing that. Not only did we do that in Yavapai County, and every municipality picked that up very, very quickly, the state of Arizona picked it up and actually passed it as a law.
Let me ask you about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that was passed in 2021 and signed into law by Joe Biden. Would you have voted in favor of that?
I think infrastructure, and I would have to go back and review the bill very, very closely, but I think infrastructure is a key element to our transportation models. If we don't have bridges, if we don't have roads, if we don't have these infrastructures that are protecting you as you drive down the highways, as you're, motoring from one state to another, then it's an unsafe condition, and that's something that we have to deal with. The federal dollars, on the other hand, seem to be too far to the east, in my opinion. What I'm going to do when I'm congressman and I'm elected to represent Arizona's 2nd Congressional District, we're going to bring those dollars, those transportation dollars, back to the state of Arizona. We're going to get some corridors going and some transportation going that makes it a lot safer. I mean, you go up onto the I-40 and all of a sudden it's brand new, it's a beautiful roadway. Less than a year, it's already falling apart because the amount of traffic and the weight of the traffic on that roadway. So infrastructure is very, very important, but we got to bring those dollars from the east over to the west a little more often.
Let's shift gears over to the immigration topic. You mentioned earlier the wall on the border. Do you think we should have a wall along the entire U.S.-Mexico border?
Absolutely. I've been with, like I said, I was on the Trump administration. We know how to roll up our sleeves and get to work and get things done. So with that said, the wall itself is a great tool for our Border Patrol agents. Believe it or not, I was actually at the border when I was a county supervisor just after President Trump was elected. I toured the border. I spoke with the Border Patrol. You don't need to go down there for a photo op to see that there's something wrong going on here. I not only did that, but I spoke with the people down there in San Luis and the various other towns in those areas that were built largely by USDA rural development dollars, and that's a whole nother deal with housing and everything else that I helped with. But you can tell that it actually affected them in a positive manner because they didn't have to worry about the amount of drugs. People don't understand, it's not just about illegal immigration, although that is a huge issue. It's about the drugs and the trafficking that's going on, human trafficking. For years, I've been trying to get it out there on social media that this is a huge issue. We're missing kids, we're missing people, what's happening to them? These are issues that I take very, very personal, and typically I'm out in front of it before it's happening because what you have to be a good representative is a good listener. And that's one thing that I appreciate about myself is the fact that rather than sit here and blab my mouth all day long, I would like to listen and see what every individual's issue is so that I can go back and address it. I guarantee you, when I'm elected, my offices will be open. The doors may be locked for security reasons, I get that, but people will be in those offices and you'll be able to even live stream me if I have a moment in the schedule, just like if you were in DC. Because when you're a representative, you represent the people, nothing else. I've had the corner office, I don't need it anymore. I wasn't actually going to run for this office in this go-around until I reached out personally to Eli Crane last October. I heard very little. Yes, we'll get together when I'm in the district. Well, unfortunately, he's not in the district very often, so I didn't hear from him. December, hey, Merry Christmas. Again, yeah, back at you. So if we're going to be serious about what we do, we need to have serious representation. And that I don't think we get from Eli Crane.
Let's stay on the immigration topic. And there are roughly 580,000 people who were brought to the United States as children who are in the DACA program that keeps them from being prosecuted and removed from the country. Should these people be given a path to permanent legal status, or should they be deported to their country of origin?
So this is a very bad topic to talk about because kids, number one, when you start involving kids in anything, it becomes very personal, especially to dads, especially to moms, especially to people in general. We don't want to see things happen to kids. And I've heard a lot of rumors about the kids coming across, even with undocumented worker, or not undocumented workers, but folks that are bringing them across so that they can cross illegally as well. So I would say from that standpoint, I think we need to vet as to where their family is. It should have never gotten this far. There is no reason why federal law was circumvented by an executive order to open the border up. We should all be, regardless of your status. I started out as a forklift operator after I got out of the military. Okay, I loved the job. I loved working in the warehouse, and I worked myself up to management. I was able to do all these things because I had that path forward, and people are looking for that. They're looking for the light to come to the United States. And I get that, and that's personal, but there is a legal way to do it. Open borders, you don't have a country with open borders. So our kids we need to figure out who they really belong to. And as far as asylum here, I think they really need to go back where they came from with their families and come into this country legally.
But asylum is separate from the DACA program. No,
Yes.
No one can get into the DACA program anymore. And they're not necessarily children anymore. They're people who came here as children. They could be in their 30s at this point. That specific group of people, do you think that now we have their names, we know who they are? Can we deport them, or should we allow them to stay in the country and find a legal pathway for that?
Yeah, there is a legal way to come into this country. We need to follow the established law, period.
So the folks in DACA, we can remove them? You'd
Absolutely.
like to see the DACA folks
we need to
removed.
realize we are a nation of laws. Those laws have to be followed. Sometimes it hurts to say, we have to deport certain people. We have to get back to our immigration status to where you come in here legally or you don't come in here at all. So to me, yes, we need to deport those people because here's what happens when you have a lot of people coming into the country as we do. And we see this especially in rural environments where we already don't have a lot of emergency services or health centers and whatnot. All those resources are going along just fine, and then all of a sudden they start to stretch because of the amount of people that we're throwing into that system, okay? I've seen this with the health department, and it's federally subsidized, so the health departments get so overwhelmed they actually have to close their doors at certain times during the day. Well, that's not helping at all because now the ERs are starting to get flooded with certain maybe somebody's got a cold or somebody's got this and they need that medical attention. So there's reasons why we have these laws, and sometimes it doesn't feel fair, but we need to realize that once those resources are stretched so thin, whether it be law enforcement, emergency services, or whatnot, we can't really be a nation, and we can't really look out for those if we can't even look out for ourselves.
And the other groups of people who are here illegally, the folks crossing the border now and claiming asylum are here under legal are here legally once they've been adjudicated. But there's many other people who are in, the millions of people in here illegally. Should we start rounding them up and removing them from the country in mass deportation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know about mass deportation. I would hope it doesn't get to that. Again, this should have never happened. You have established federal law, untie the hands of the Border Patrol, allow them to do their jobs, okay? Yes, mass deportation, if that's what it takes, we need to get back to normalcy.
And what about that bipartisan immigration bill that was sponsored by Senator Kirsten Sinema? What was your thoughts on that?
I didn't read that bill. I'd like time to go back and study it. So you want to give me a little heads up on it?
All right. I would say we should shift topics. Let's go over to wildfire issues up in your area, because that's a very serious concern in Congressional District 2. What do you think the role of the federal government is in combating those wildfires?
So I used to be a law enforcement officer as well. I was a reserve deputy sheriff. And for me, looking at resources that are like the same. So federal fire departments versus local fire departments versus state fire departments. When it comes to wildfire, we're protecting lands, we're protecting people, we're protecting habitats or our buildings and whatnot. We need to come together and work together, okay? If that instills, even up in Show Low, I think we need a weather station up there to collect data so that that data can tell us when the hot spots are going to be and where they're going to be. Having that data on hand at least allows us to kind of, like the weather, prescribe, hey, there's going to be an issue, on this day because of this or that or whatever. I believe the federal government's role should be to help out the nation as best possible in the event of an emergency. And I'll say that, again, my opponent, Eli Crane, voted on a bill that actually reduced the overall readiness of our emergency services. So 9% of emergency preparedness dollars was taken away this past year. And that's not saving money, that's putting our communities at risk because now we have less dollars to fight fires like that or identify fires like that. So I think we need to come together as a team, work together, share information similar to what law enforcement does now, sharing that information and share resources to get those wildfires under control.
Do you think the growth of these wildfires is connected at all to climate change?
Honestly, I'm not a scientist. I will listen to whoever wants to tell me about what it is about climate change. It does feel like things are getting warmer. It does feel like things are getting drier, but that could be because I'm getting older. But nonetheless, climate change could play a role in that, but I think the Earth goes through cycles, and we need to be prepared to identify that and to move it forward. Again, the data station up in Show Low. Rather than just guessing when's the fire going to be, let's gather some data. We can put a man on the moon, but we can't gather data about wildfires and where they're going to strike next. We can already track the amount of lightning bolts that are hitting and gets me out of the pool in the evening, but we can't track these things. So I think we can do a lot better on that.
Do you think the federal government should be doing more or less on the climate change front?
I think we're doing quite well as a country. I think we need to step it up and put some other people out there, other countries, to start helping us out. Because I think the United States, with scrubbers, with a lot of things that we've got going on right now that protect our environment, I mean, we've not seen this clean air in a long, long time. So, and it's not just air, it's water, right? It's also the soils. It's also a lot of different things. Climates, for our vegetation. These are things that we need to keep into consideration, but also not that they hurt. We don't want them to hurt our citizens themselves.
Let's shift gears again and talk about abortion. Would you support a national ban on abortion? And if so, at what stage of the pregnancy?
I am pro-life. Personally, I believe life starts at the beginning of conception.
And so, but there is the question of, should it be a state-by-state ban? Should it be a national ban? Where would you land on
I think
that?
this is a state piece. I believe each state has the right. We pick our communities, right? We go into the communities that suit us the best. And that includes the laws for those cities, and that includes how things are ran and so on and so forth. So this in particular one, for me, it would never happen in my family. I don't believe in abortion, but I also don't believe that government has the federal government has the reach to be able to say yes or no to the state. State rights have to come into play at this point.
Do you feel the same way about the IVF treatments? That's been an issue lately, and there's been some push in Washington to say IVF is a legal process across the country in case a state should say you can't create embryos because there's issues of their destruction along the way.
Right. Science has come a long way. I'm not sure 100% how far it's come, to be honest with you. Being a politician, I spend a lot of days shaking hands and going to different places. But I can tell you that science has done a lot of great things, but I would have to learn a little bit more about that topic itself.
What strategies, and we'll shift gears again here to the entitlement programs, and we are running out of time. What strategies would you pursue to preserve Social Security for future generations?
Well, first off, we've got to stop the out-of-control spending. That's got to be number one. Why my opponent did not vote for the Fiscal Responsibility Act, I'm not 100% sure. If it's going to take down the money that's going to different programs that really don't make sense, why the federal government is spending it on certain things, this is where we got to start. And we start by doing that by reducing the amount of funding that's going out for frivolous things. The government's responsibility is to protect the United States, is to secure its borders, is to have a strong military. And those are always number one. The act itself reduced the amount of spending. It actually put a cap on the amount of spending that you could do anything outside of defense. So again, I think it starts with reducing the amount of money that we're spending. We can only use a credit card for so long. Okay, I know if I use my credit card at home, my wife looks at me and goes, you know, we still got to pay the bills. So I think the country needs to understand that. I think the people do. And we're pretty well fed up with the fact that the money keeps going out and all we're doing is raising taxes, raising taxes, raising taxes. Did you know in my 7 years as county supervisor in Yavapai County, 4 years in a row, we reduced the overall tax rate. That's by having that conversation, making sure you're working together and reduce spending.
Well, we are almost out of time here. I think there are a lot of questions I would have liked to get to, but we didn't have time. But you have a chance here for a 1-minute closing statement.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having this. I'm very disappointed that my opponent just neglected to want to be here. This was the only televised event that we're going to have in this race, and I think it's important that the American people get to see both sides of it. I'm not a perfect person. I don't pretend to be. I do like my family, and I want to see my kids grow up in a world that's a little bit better, and I think we're all in that same boat. So if you have an opportunity, go to my website. It's jacksmithforcongress.com. You can follow me on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm not the attack guy, okay? I'm not going to point fingers. I'm not going to tell people how bad somebody else is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work for you and the benefit of our district so that our kids can grow up in a stronger environment. They understand that people are there to support them because they see it through our politicians. Performance reflects leadership 110%, and for years I have built really good and strong work groups, and I intend to do that with the federal government.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That is all the time we have for our one-on-one conversation with Jack Smith, Republican candidate for Congressional District 2. As a reminder, the Arizona primary election is on July 30th, and early voting starts July 3rd. All registered voters can participate in the primary, including independents. There are a lot of offices up for election this year, so we'll keep hosting debates throughout the November general election. Head to azmedia.org to see a list of every local media partner, plus upcoming debates, and where you can find them on TV, radio, and digital platforms. You can also see the full debate schedule, learn more about clean elections, and submit questions for future debates by heading to azcleanelections.gov. On behalf of our partners at Clean Elections, the Arizona Media Association, Reister and Bitfire Studios, thanks for watching.